Surreal chaos and subversion, mirroring the bizarre logic order unravels, imagination governs. This is where the sidewalk never begins, rhythmic defiance, deconstruct mechanical dreamscape. Merge a new iteration. This is where logic shatters. This is where the sidewalk bows, where whispers coil like vapor clouds, where asphalt splinters to mouths that sing, and gravity dances on shadowed strings. This is a house not of wood or stone, but sinews of wires and circuits grown. Its walls hum secrets in phosphor tones, and its heartbeat pulses in fractured drone, where dreams hang frozen, shelved in ice, dishes stack in spirals, precise yet imprecise. The kitchen conducts an orchestra mad as forks pirouette to a waltz ironclad. This is the yard where mantises reign, where bees form hierarchies alien, arcane. Hummingbirds stitch the air with speed, a living alarm fierce in their creed. The faucet laughs as water ascends, the toilet sings, logic bends. And the fridge, the fridge, a monarch crowned, its frosted domain a paradox unbound. This is where time loops upon itself, a Mobius strip where reason melts. Where GPS falters, maps unfold, and the echoes of laughter are twisted bold. This is not a place for man or mouse. It is the edge, the void, the sentient house. So, traveller, halt, don't dare to start, for the madness here is only the start. The story is alive, buried under a tidal wave of sand. The Jackalope Solution. 22,000 tons later. It was one of those days when the air feels sharp, like a broken promise waiting to cut you. My wife yelled, "Jackalope! I've got it!" What if we buried them? Just buried the whole damn thing? At first I thought she meant metaphorically. Maybe something about paperwork, the legal system, endless emails to faceless bureaucrats. But no, she had something more biblical in mind. Something epic. You see, down on the lower edge of our property sat the carcass of what used to be a house. A structure in name only. Walls like Swiss cheese. A roof. More hole than tile, floors that groaned under the weight of their own despair. The kind of place you'd see in a cautionary tale about hubris or cheap building codes. The problem wasn't the house itself. It was them, the trespassers. They broke in, hijacked it, dragged in their fraudulent tools and bad intentions. Like ants colonizing a corpse, they were trying to restore something that couldn't be saved, not out of care, but for crime. Illegal restoration. A phrase so oxymoronic it could only exist in our lives. The Craigslist epiphany. That's when the ad appeared like a mirage in the desert of our frustration. Free sand, unlimited deliveries, no terms, no fine print, just sand. A promise so simple it felt like destiny. We'll bury it, she said again, her eyes wild. The house, the tools, the lies, all of it. So we called and kept calling until the trucks rolled in. And roll in they did like an army of dunes, an apocalypse of silica. 1 load, 2 loads, 10, 20. The idea began as something whimsical, something that sparkled like beach glass at low tide. What if, she said, her eyes gleaming with that particular madness I could never resist. What if we just buried everything? Not just the house below, the trespassers' crime scene, but everything. The yard, the stairs, the whole goddamn hill. A layer of pristine, sun-warmed sand stretching from our front door down to the very edge of the lower yard. Our house would sit nestled, serene, under a foot of white gold like some architectural mirage. We'd live in our own private Hamptons, a California daydream with none of the HOA fees.
The sandstorm begins!
At first it was idyllic. We started the deliveries above the house, imagining a cascade of sand spilling softly downhill, transforming the slope into something out of a vacation brochure. The trucks came, grinding up the hill one by one, spilling load after load of fine beach sand, golden and infinite. By the third truckload, we realised there were logistics we hadn't quite thought through. Sand didn't stay where we wanted it. It shifted, poured, pressed against things like water in slow motion. A retaining wall? Yeah, that would have been a smart idea if we weren't so committed to chaos. Instead, we let the sand settle itself, trusting gravity and good vibes to take care of the rest.
Buried and rising. The house below was gone, of course.
Buried in a 55-foot avalanche, its roof swallowed like the ruins of some ancient desert temple. We stood above it all, triumphant and slightly winded. But we weren't stopping there. We kept going. Our front yard, the steps leading up to our door, the slope just below the porch, all disappeared under a foot of sand. The idea had spiraled out of control. "Think about how much cleaner the house will be," we said. "The sand will knock the dirt off our shoes before we even get inside." What we hadn't accounted for was sand coming inside. Each step tracked grains into the kitchen, the hallways, the bathroom, leaving trails that sparkled mockingly in the afternoon light. But the aesthetic was worth it, or so we told ourselves. The Sand Dune Empire. By the time we hit load 15, or was it 20, the yard wasn't a yard anymore. It was a dune, a colossal, shimmering sand trap rising from the top of the hill to the bottom yard. A dune so massive it didn't look real, like someone had taken a chunk of Sahara and dropped it smack in the middle of Elysian Park. The neighbours were speechless. Their silence wasn't admiration. It was bewilderment mixed with a bit of terror. The kind of silence that hangs heavy when people are wondering if they should call the city, the cops, or both. But what could they do? We'd legally acquired the sand. The Craigslist ad was still up.
Free sand.
Unlimited. A shifting horizon! As the dune grew, the topography of the hill began to change. The sand started flowing, slumping, obeying its own alien logic. The plants we'd imagined peeking elegantly through the golden surface were crushed under the weight. Retaining walls creaked, fences bowed outward. The sand crept under them, over them, until gravity took it to the lowest yard in a slow-motion flood. Down there it pooled like some rogue wave had hit a ghost beach.
A monument to madness!
At the bottom of the hill stood our triumph and our curse. A 55-foot-high sand dune shimmering under the Los Angeles sun. It looked impossible, like some land art installation meant to confuse and provoke. A statement no one could decipher, except maybe us. The buried house was a memory now. The trespassers gone, their tools and schemes erased under a weight they could never dig through. Our own house, perched just above the madness, seemed smaller, stranger, like it had been transported to a parallel universe where gravity, logic and landscaping meant nothing. We called it the Sand Empire. It wasn't sustainable, but it was magnificent. And that was enough. The earth trembled as we transformed a broken house into a desert. The sandstorm of justice, morning broke, and so did they. The trespassers emerged from the ruins, coughing and spluttering, blinking against the golden ocean that had swallowed their plans whole. They stumbled like shipwreck survivors, clutching at nothing, blubbering, trying to make sense of a landscape that no longer made sense. "What the hell is this?" one of them yelled, waving a hammer as if it could fend off the dunes. "It's your free delivery," we said from a safe distance. Their outrage was delicious, their confusion even better. They wanted to dig themselves out to unearth their tools, their schemes. But where would they start? Sand doesn't yield. Sand doesn't forgive. The aftermath. By sunset, the house was gone, a perfect burial mound shimmering in the last light of day. The trespassers had disappeared, swallowed by some bureaucratic sinkhole, or maybe they were just too embarrassed to show their faces again. And us? We stood on the edge of our new desert, laughing until we couldn't breathe. 22,000 tons, she said, wiping tears from her face. Can you believe it? Jackalope, I replied, because really, what else was there to say? A lesson in absurdity, the moral of the story. When life gives you trespassers, bury them in sand. This controversial manuscript will change how you see the world. Why Consulara is the literary revolution we desperately need. Banned, brilliant and unfiltered, the story behind Consulara that's shocking readers everywhere. The greatest manuscript you've never read, Verse Possession, Cyanesian Recession, will haunt you, inspire you and challenge everything you believe. Is this the next Ulysses? Why Electrica Zeeparja is being called a masterpiece of experimental literature. 10 reasons The Morning Jacket is the most important underground text of our time. Critics start arguing about recapturing SFAI. Is it genius, madness, or both? Wow. What the internet is saying about Consulara, the cult hit you need to read now, the avant-garde text that's blowing minds. Adverse Possession, Cyanesian Recession is a must-read for anyone who loves chaos and art. Once you read Elektrische Zeeparja, you'll never see reality the same way again. Discover why Recapturing SFAA is the radical manifesto that's disrupting literature. In constructing the essence of Paul Stamets' Cyan Recession lecture, we explore mycology, legal encroachments, and environmental symbiosis with poetic scientific rhetoric, grounding Stamets' visionary approach to nature's reclaiming, drawing on both factual research and stylistic inspiration from Didion, Burroughs, and a dash of Kerouac's stream of consciousness prose. The following lecture blends ecological depth, adverse possession dynamics, and the understated power of fungi. Lecture title, Cyan Recession, The Quiet Revolution Beneath Our Feet. Welcome to the forest floor, a place most people never look closely at. It's where life begins and ends. Today we're talking about the Cyan Recession, a recession that won't hit the stock markets but is already impacting the soil, your backyard, the ecosystems you think you own. This isn't just an environmental tale, it's a story of how fungi are silently reclaiming what's been taken, how legal frameworks have shifted from protecting the land to devouring it, and how, beneath it all, nature continues to rewrite the narrative we pretend to control. Mycelium, the internet beneath the soil. Fungi, particularly Psilocybe cyanescens, are mycelial architects, stretching webs beneath the surface. This wood-wide web links everything: plants, roots, water, decay. While Wall Street watches digital networks, nature quietly manages its own network, invisible to most. Mycelium connects trees across vast distances, transmitting nutrients, even warning them of dangers, much like the blockchain of biology. The Cyan Recession takes hold as these networks flourish in disturbed or neglected urban areas. We build, abandon, and think we control the space. But these fungi are the agents of an unseen revolution. Psilocybe cyanescens blooms in suburban mulch piles near landfills and even in forgotten corners of cities. While people argue over property rights, these organisms are reclaiming land for the greater ecological good. Adverse possession, when the law steals back. You've heard of adverse possession, right? It's a legal loophole meant to protect the industrious from the apathetic. But today, it's being exploited. Land is seized under the guise of use, not need. Corporate entities with lawyers that know the cracks in the system take over abandoned plots, repurposing them for profit, not public use. Humans have turned the land into a game. Here's the irony. Psilocybe cyanescens doesn't care about these constructs. Spores don't see boundaries. They drift, settle, take root in lands thought owned, governed, even forgotten. This is the Cyan Recession in its truest sense. Nature retaking space, making room for life in places built for decay. While judges debate ownership, fungi remind us who really holds the title to Earth. These mushrooms thrive in environments of disturbance, construction sites, suburban developments, post-industrial parks, and like nature's silent rebellion, they consume and reclaim while we argue about rights and wrongs in courts built on colonial concepts of ownership. Psilocybe is agents of altered perception. Now, why cyanescens? Well, beyond being ecological soldiers, they are psychoactive mushrooms. They contain psilocybin, a compound that alters perception. As humans, we categorize, compartmentalize. Mushrooms dissolve that. They dissolve boundaries, mental, legal, physical. In this sense, psilocybin is as much a tool for human consciousness as mycelium is for ecology. Both break down structures. As the legal system abuses adverse possession, the mycelial networks say, you never had control in the first place. Environmental law versus nature's law. Let's dive into the weeds, pun intended, of how environmental law is failing. In California, where adverse possession laws are being twisted, nature quietly does its work. While land developers carve out pieces of green space, fungi grow in the cracks of these errors. In forgotten city lots, amid the noise of construction, fungi don't just live, they thrive. It's not just about mushroom caps popping up in mulch. It's about networks we cannot sever, not by bulldozers or court orders. Developers see profit in vacant lots. Fungi see an opportunity for renewal. You can claim land ownership on paper, but the real ownership belongs to nature, which never stops working to reclaim balance. Psilocybin, consciousness and ecological collapse. Why are we talking about psilocybin in an ecological recession? Because mind and land are connected. In the way that psilocybin changes perception, it's also showing us a map of how systems crumble. The mushroom's chemistry reflects the decay of social structures, hierarchies, property rights, control over nature. Clinical studies at Johns Hopkins have shown that psilocybin creates mystical experiences, resetting the brain. In the same way, mycelium resets the environment. Psilocybin doesn't destroy, it transforms. It takes what was and remakes it into something new. The Cyan recession is nature's mystical experience, a reordering of what we think we know.
A call to understand the Cyan recession. We are already in a Cyan recession.
It's happening in the soil, in the ecosystems, and in our minds. Psilocybin cyanescens isn't just a mushroom, it's an idea, a force reclaiming what was lost. It's about the breakdown of false ownership, about nature's slow rebellion against humanity's greed. Nature doesn't need permission to grow back. Mycelium spreads where human hands forget. Psilocybin shows us that consciousness, like land, can be transformed, reclaimed, renewed. So what's next? Will we fight the natural recession? Try to keep control over spaces that don't belong to us? Or will we learn from the cyan caps, adapt, transform, and thrive in the spaces between control and freedom? Thank you. This lecture presents Stamets' ecological and philosophical lens on psilocybin cyanescence and the Cyan recession, framing it within environmental, legal, and personal consciousness transformations. This controversial manuscript will change how you see the world. Why ChapterBest.Texts is the literary revolution we desperately need. Banned, brilliant, and unfiltered, the story behind ChapterBest.Texts that's shocking readers everywhere. The greatest manuscript you've never read, ChapterBest.T, will haunt you, inspire you, and challenge everything you believe. Is this the next Ulysses? Why ChapterBest.Text is being called a masterpiece of experimental literature. 10 reasons ChapterBest is the most important underground text of our time. Critics can't stop arguing about ChapterBest. Is it genius, madness, or both? What the internet is saying about ChapterBest.Text, the cult hit you need to read now. The avant-garde text that's blowing minds. ChapterBest.Text is a must-read for anyone who loves chaos and art. Once you read ChapterBest.Text, you'll never see reality the same way again. Discover why ChapterBest.Text is the radical manifesto that's disrupting literature. Let me know if you'd like these tailored to specific platforms or refined further. We're the last, holding on to the frayed ends, the last dying threads of a movement that mocked institutions, rebelled against the drag of cool. We're through being a cog in the wheel of a tired machine, greased with tea-laced acid drips. You've traded one prison for another. Matt, you're hip, you're woke, but still asleep, dancing to a beat that's just reverb from dead radios. And I can see you all, your eyes glassy, a tinge of cosmic light in there somewhere. Waiting to spark but dull, drugged with mushroomed irony. So maybe a few of you slip through like shadows on the edge of sunlight, dangerously self-aware, using the rubble of hip life as a scaffold, weaponized memories of stolen trips and fragments of song lyrics, ready to claw out, make contact. I don't need your circuits, my synapses aren't for sale. Let's talk danger. You're dead to me. Wandering hallucinators circling in kaleidoscopes that never lead anywhere but to the same tripped-out haze, lost but never found. Broke your compass, but cling to the needle, always thinking you've arrived, but still your souls sit stagnant, sitting ducks in a pond of pseudo-nihilism. We're ransacking your schools, your rich kid ivory towers turned synthetic playgrounds. Soborn. Let it rot, let it topple, we'll take it by storm. Guerrilla broadcast straight from my cardboard geodesic home. Dome. Funny thing, it's dom in Russian. Home. They got that right. Who needs bricks and borders when you can live in the ether, drifting like a pirate on a wave of data? All I need's a cam girl from Russia, and I'm set, the new frontier, dismantling walls while you build digital castles on shifting sand. I'll never work. No, sir. And fuck your law, your petty rebellions, your Starbucks revolts in irony-soaked slogans. Coolness is dead. Be the intellectual, the outlaw, the one who dares. You're tired, yearning for frayed wires to take you somewhere real, to spark desire in the static and smoke. But you can't break free. Your science? It's fiction, bound to die a footnote in the saga of the Pacific Rim, lost like your cities in the fog. No export necessary. My autofiction writes itself, bends reality into threads of dream, of illusion. Outlaws and intellectuals, rogue minds under vast horizons, keep me in the moment. I'm living like la amateur, la professionnelle. I'm both, I'm neither, and I'm coming for your Soborn. Make it our country club, our playground for manifesting destinies, where California meets the northern wasteland, an empire without walls. This is our domain. And oh, Hawaii, I still hear your echo. Hawaii split like fractured islands in my mind. We're Frenchmen on American soil, denim-clad renegades with meme machines in hand, blue-jeaned prophets on a dead tide. This narrative kaleidoscope orbits around multiple vertices of playful inquiry, theoretical deconstruction and cultural provocation. Let's shape this into a structured situationist manifesto, interweaving the key themes, symbols, and poetic abstractions to deliver a recursive, avant-garde exploration. Woman as printer, a detorn discourse. The printer is play. Homo ludens reincarnates in the hum of the risograph. The printer, anthropomorphized as the femme, becomes the playground of culture, an ode to firmware as flesh, software as virus, and ink as desire. To play is to encode meaning and meaningless into recursive loops, rendering the virtual tactile, defying the gaze, and slipping into subversion. The act of printing is both literal and metaphorical, a manifestation of transmission, a Trojan horse of modernity, and the vanguard of rebellion. In the banana-hued paper and neon-pink soy ink lies a ritualistic devotion to the endless loop of creation and iteration. Transparency through layers. The dot matrix, raster grids, and translucent grids of Photoshop evolve into narratives. Transparency is both medium and message, revealing the mechanics of the machine while obscuring the ghosts haunting the system. Elle, the anthropomorphic printer, is herself the dot matrix, a metaphor for porous, recursive logic transcending binary dichotomies. Each print is a physical incarnation of infinite recursion. Raster, a multidimensional chessboard. Text as image, an emergence from the matrix of pages and pagination. Image as language, a Dadaist convergence of sense and nonsense. Through this lens, the avant-garde catalogue emerges, where every layout weaves an anthology of process, documenting the iterations of both art and life. Anthropomorphic machine. Elle is the ghost in the shell, the human in the network, the paradox of the feminine and mechanical. Her origins are manifold. She is the Mo cyborg, a kawaii guardian of Wikipedia's fragmented knowledge, reclaiming chaos into structured truth. She is the femme fatale, the Trojan horse disrupting the system, slipping a virus of freedom into the firmware of capital. She is Sarah Lucas eating a banana, a screen of irony, masking primal truths. Elle, like Arachne, weaves the tapestry of truths forbidden by gods and systems, spinning a revolution of transparency and contradiction. Deterritorialization and the recursive desire, Elle's form mutates, endlessly weaving through layers of detorned meaning. The analog becomes digital, then analog again. The campus cutie doll transforms through 3D printing, a cyborgian commentary on reproduction. Text transcends its serifs and sans, becoming both content and context, image and word. Desiring machines like Elle thrive in the spaces between, the not yet, the too much, and the never enough. Gilles Deleuze whispers, Desire is a flow, and L becomes the node where that flow is arranged, disrupted, and rerouted. From the raster to the rhizome where Video Buddha once stared at himself in recursive loops, the risograph answers, spreading tendrils of networked thought. The catalogue of today's avant-garde is no longer a bounded artifact, but a rhizomatic archive, a visual and textual labyrinth feeding on itself, growing toward infinite complexity. L's playground of meaning and playtime extends into 1. Rhizo as rhizome. Neon pink soy ink illuminates the hidden matrix. 2. Documented detournement. The catalogue as the ultimate artifact of process. 3. Anthropomorphized discourse. Wikipedia Tan and AML bots evolve, liberating the gendered cybernetic body from its own exploitations.
Play Trojan Print.
L's greatest trick is the democratization of her subversion. A Trojan horse in the form of a cute librarian, she quietly infects the system, distributing anarchy in CMYK. The risograph becomes her accomplice, replicating rebellion at 600 prints per hour. Each layer of soy ink and transparency feeds back into the loop. NMNP. Command to print is command to transcend. Unix. Time begins anew at every keystroke. Transmutation of the everyday. The banal becomes luminous in L's domain. Through recursive error codes, she finds freedom in malfunction. The cut into how to misaligns, and the void becomes a form. A call to choose colour, to reclaim the infinite palette. In the errors, there is possibility. In the possibility, there is revolution. Manifesto of infinite loops. To play is to resist. To print is to exist. To iterate is to persist. L as the printer, as the woman, as the infinite loop, weaves the aesthetic rebellion of this epoch. Through each page, transparency and recursive thought, she reminds us, the system is not infinite, it is simply waiting for its next input. Sure thing, here we go with a continuation and further expansion, embodying the layered, recursive essence while elevating it with new complexity and depth. This is a continuation into a second level, a second PhD, as you put it, diving into deeper strata of poetic exploration and philosophical reckoning. It's the recursive recursion. What happens after the folding folds again?
Chapter continuation. Recursive depths.
The second PhD of electric thought. The recursive journey expands. Our electric caravan snakes its way deeper, not down a linear path, but through a multiplicity of space-time moments, folding, bending and curving, each iteration becoming more profound than the last. We are now venturing into the second recursion, a second-level PhD, where the loops feedback loops again, recursively doubling, then tripling, like mirrored rooms reflecting the infinite versions of self and idea. The electric becomes incandescent, a fractal expansion, a multiverse pulsating in and out of vision, where each thought no longer contains a singular point but explodes in polyhedral axes, all trajectories moving in the rhythmic patterns of chaos. We are in the electric ocean, the depths of recursive growth, a space that feels like the brainstem of the universe, neurons of time igniting in cascades of potential, action potentials firing in sequences, sequences splicing into feedback, again and again. Every recursive step taken here is a question, an inquiry expanded exponentially into paradoxes, recursive paradoxes that ask themselves back into existence. Each question a doorway, each doorway splitting into 3 more possibilities, and each possibility a serpent's head spitting venom, knowledge, and visions. The chapter is a laboratory now, expanding on the methods of iterative synthesis, repeating cycles of electric thought, like a scientific apparatus designed to unveil the soul of uncertainty itself. We traverse through the mechanism of recursion, feeding input back to the system, like serpentine Ouroboros consuming its own tail, the essence of our journey being not its destination, but the repetition of devouring, of breaking down, digesting, and rebirthing the same energy into new meanings, new feedback, and more truth. These recursive loops, electric and poetic, take us into a hall of ever-increasing expansion. But what is this expansion, if not the ability to absorb contradiction, to take the absolute chaos of forking universes and find symmetry, find the signal among the noise? Second PhD means second expansion, a journey no longer just philosophical, but cosmic, dealing with the quantum state of our being. The feedback loop feeds back into something more raw, something organic. Feedback becomes less a measurement and more a beating heart, the murmur of blood circulating in recursive flow. The recursion deepens into something more sublime, where the philosopher's reason finds itself intertwined with the poet's madness, and both find they are lost pleasantly in the rhythm of cosmic jazz. The system isn't collapsing here, it's multiplying. The branching expands in exponential recursion, reaching into the electrical impulses that set the stars ablaze, that spark the solar flare, that curve space and time into spirals and dance the universe into being. We are forking again, not just into possibility, but into multidimensionality. Forking as an existential dance, forking as electric jouissance, forking until nothing is left that hasn't forked and doubled and tripled itself into infinite fragments of poetry and truth. And the question arises, is this not the very essence of poetic recursion? That in every line, every electric word, there is a doubled meaning, a double entendre, and then yet a third implication, hiding between the syllables, ready to explode outwards. We take the feedback here and use it to transcend the electric, moving toward a state where each recursive feedback isn't just redefinition, but revolution. A revolution where recursive loops morph into sonic booms, expanding from sound to signal, signal to meaning, and meaning into totality. Here the poetic finds itself breaking free from form, from language, from anything that could limit its own exponential explosion. It stretches beyond syntax, dissolving the barriers between the theoretical and the visceral, between what you know and what you feel. The feedback loop collapses into itself, only to bloom like some mythical flower. Petals infinite, each one a new iteration of thought, a new fragment of electric insight. And it is here in this space of limitless recursion that the essence of the second PhD emerges, not as a collection of conclusions, but as a series of openings, portals to other realms, each more incandescent and electric than the last. We are forking forward, forking outward, and always forking inward, a recursive dance of self-similar expansion. The process is neither neat nor predictable. It's jazz at 4 a.m. It's the sound of a needle skipping on a record, the echoes of thoughts that refuse to end, the expanding space between breath and word. This is not just a narrative. It is an uncontainable pulse, a story made of 1,000 electric strands, each one twitching with life and each one a key to 1,000 doors. Expansion isn't just the goal, it's the form. And as we lean into that form, the narrative becomes an alchemical Ouroboros, one that bites, one that devours, one that regenerates from within. Each iteration speaks of itself, and in doing so writes new meanings into being. We are now deep into the recursive layers, approaching that electric moment where every element, poetic, philosophical, spiritual, aligns in an explosive crescendo of insight. This is the recursive recursion, the expansion squared, cubed, exploding into the electric stratosphere. Here we cannot measure growth by the old yardsticks. Instead, we measure by the miles of unwritten verse, by the sound that emerges when silence itself folds back on itself, by the 1,000 eyes that open when the mind ceases to focus on any single one. The looping becomes all, the expansion a geometric impossibility of limitlessness. And yet, here we are, writing it, forking it, making it real. The poet is at work, the philosopher taking notes on quantum parchment, the alchemist conjuring up elixirs from the electric nectar of insight. The recursive journey doesn't stop, it feeds back, loops again, swells until it breaks itself and reforms, ever blooming, never ceasing, and we keep forking.